trip to Montgomery, Alabama. That was at 1:30 a.m. Okay. By 2:30 a.m., by 2:50 a.m., JR is tired of moping in his hotel room, so he picks up the phone and calls Karen Krager. So, how are things in the Pelican State? Karen said. Fun in some ways, boring in others. Ken promises me trips to the beach, but it seems that he's napping in the afternoon, JR said. Well, when you get free time, why don't you call me? Why don't you call me when you're getting ready to head home from your little trip? Karen, I miss you. I miss you too, Karen said. 3:15 p.m. JR is in a hotel bar ordering a double margarita. You look a little lonesome, cowboy, a young woman said. There's nothing worse than drinking alone. Okay, girl, let me buy you a drink, JR said. She orders a double daiquiri, and they sit together and drink together. 3:50 p.m. Ken wakes up from his nap to find that JR had only a couple of drinks. Man, I'm sorry. What do you have going on tonight? New Orleans Christian Coalition tonight here at the hotel, but Olivia is with family and I don't have a date. Ken sit up. Well, what about Sally? She's back in Baton Rouge with her daddy. Frank told me at one point you were interested in a Heather Ludier. I happen to know she's in New Orleans, and I know her hotel number. Give her a call. But I'm coming too. 7 p.m. JR, Ken, and Heather attend the dinner for the New Orleans Christian Coalition. T-bone steak, mashed potatoes, asparagus, and tea was for dinner. Ken brought in a strawberry water from the machine. I'm sorry we had to part ways 6.5 years ago, JR, Heather said. But Grandma was scared about how powerful your daddy was should we get together. And so she put me back in public school, Heather said. Not your fault. I should have expressed more interest in you. What are you doing now? Attending Tulane University, studying business management. I get a bachelor's and master's in 2 years. And who knows? I may move to Lubbock and look you up. Please do that, JR said. 9 p.m. JR takes Heather to the hotel room while Ken checks in with Rand on the phone. Rand had been studying all night at the library at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. So tell me, Heather, why did you express love for me at the beginning of the last semester of my junior year, JR said. You look so lost. Someone said Hendrick Oil was in the red, and you guys would have sold the ranch. Hadn't your grandpa intervened? JR set up. Granddad gave us money. And right after you changed schools, Dad put his business in the black by paying off 87% of what he owed. And his banker agreed he would have ate the interest. So what are you studying at Texas Tech? Heather said, hugging him. Communication studies and political science. Daddy wants me to be the PR lobbyist of the firm. The next day was July 21st. At 5 a.m., JR calls Brad to see how he's doing, and they talk for a little while. Oh, you know, I'm just looking over my fall schedule. See, you're going to be returning from Virginia Beach in about a month, and I'm ready for us to be ready. What about you? JR's voice became withdrawn. Oh, feeling homesick. Kidnaps in the afternoons. And you want to come home. Enjoying New Orleans. It's just like it's lonely sometimes. Just then, Rand broke in on freeway, calling. Thank God you dudes are up. JR. Your dad stood me up again for you to take another assignment. Interview a lawyer, a judge, some Christian pastor, and a priest, Randy said. Oh, wonderful. I'm enjoying myself in New Orleans, and now we got to get political again? Look, your dad and my dad are paying for part of my education here in Charlottesville. So it would be good. Please do this one more time for me. All right. There's a New Orleans lawyer that wants to be a state senator. I'll go here interview him right now, but not before stopping to get a root beer. They stopped to get a root beer. The lawyer was home. At 5:30 a.m., JR shares a root beer and interviews Father Leon Harvey, pastor of the St. Louis Cathedral, who performed Mass occasionally at night. Listen, Father, you'll hear from me Tuesday when I get to Montgomery. You'll hear from me Tuesday when I get to Montgomery. You'll get a copy of my final report. Nice little kid like you is going to share a root beer with me and talk about how evil abortion is. It's worth your time and you won't regret it, JR said. 10:05 a.m. JR and Ken had cinnamon rolls for breakfast. They had a full morning playing contract running. Of course, Ken beat JR handily. Admit it, Ken said. Admit it! You will never beat me at cards. You sly, JR said. Yes, you say you don't, but I see every hand that you play. I'm not cheating, JR. Now you know me better than that, Ken said. At 12 p.m., JR, Ken, and Frank are eating at a lounge on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. After lunch, Ken wanted a nap, and Frank and JR decided to go swimming. Meanwhile, at Swainfield Ranch, Elizabeth and her mother, Elizabeth Swain, have been arguing about how the ranch is to be run. Yesterday, the two women had gotten into a bad argument with Jim Hendrick. Elizabeth was thinking about taking the kids and leaving for Virginia Beach or New Orleans. 5:30 p.m. JR and Ken are having Mexican food at the hotel restaurant. They didn't have long before JR would change into formal wear and go with Heather to watch a representation of The Sound of Music. 7 p.m. JR and Heather are watching the play remake of The Sound of Music. JR is kicked back, enjoying a Sprite and the play. By 9:35 p.m., JR and Heather get into a limousine and go to the Garden District for the after party of a friend of JR's daddy, Claude, or shall I say, his ex-girlfriend, Jill Allen, who would host a party with her brother. 9:45 p.m. At the party, being served with white grape juice, ginger ale, and limes. It was a fun night as JR catches up with old friends from prep school. One of them was Mike Pershing. Ironically, he was for a while an arch rival to JR. He had begun studying since 1991 at UT Austin in business communication, with emphasis on human relations. July 22nd was pretty quiet, except for some time, riverboat time, with Olivia and her family for a 3-hour riverboat breakfast cruise. And it was a good time for JR. Be positive, JR. We can still be something, JR said. I am being positive, but I want you to transfer to Texas Tech. Give it a rest, JR. You know my daddy. He wants me in a Christian school. JR hugged her. You know, honey, you say we're gonna be something. And as much as I love you, we can't with a long distance relationship. Olivia bristled. Don't compare me to Holly Hawthorne. The girl was a tweed compared to me. There was a riverboat lunch between JR and Ken at 11 o'clock that morning. And then at that night, a Mexican food dinner and a play based on the movie Grease with a sing-along. JR had a good time and often danced with Olivia. The limousine dropped off JR at the hotel, and Olivia walked him to his room. I'm glad you had a good time, JR. Well, it's nice to be away from the guys for a while, and I really enjoy your company.